In this episode of the Superpesis Roundup podcast, we look at who the podcasters are. We also look at what this podcast will cover, an introduction to the game, and all the latest news on the impact of the coronavirus. That's coming up on the Superpesis Roundup podcast. Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Superpesis Roundup podcast. I'm Ian Alba, the main host, and joining me, as hopefully forever, will be Ron Bronson, Pesis fan and American sports fan generally, and Mikko Pirhonen, who is all the way over in Finland. Has played the game, coached in the game, has a great deal of depth and knowledge, and has even coached in English. So both of you, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
Thank you, it's a privilege.
So first off, obviously a lot of people maybe have clicked on this or have decided to look at it. They don't necessarily know what this podcast is going to look at, or what Pesäpallo is. This podcast is really going to look at Pesäpallo generally, but really focus on the Superpesis, which is the top league in Finland, and in reality the professional league in the world. It kind of complements the blog that I do, which is Superpesis Roundup. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what the sport actually is, because a lot of people who are listening maybe don't know what it is. First of all, I come at it from a cricketing background, being here in the UK. Ron, you're over in the States. You come at it from a bit of a baseball background. What's your perception on the sport?
Perception on Pesis in general, you mean, or like for baseball? I mean, so I got into it a bunch of years ago, and yeah, to me, having watched it for years now and having been to games, is to me it's definitely it's based on baseball, right? So there's a lot of stuff that as a baseball fan growing up with the game, watching it and so forth, that you can see parallels between Pesis and but of course the game is very different, right? Like it's a different sport with its own energy and its own pace. But as a baseball fan, it's pretty accessible because I feel like when you really get down to it, you can see the parallels. So yeah, that's how I come at it.
And Mikko, just a quick summary. Obviously, you've got a great deal of depth in it, and we'll come on to this in a bit more detail later on. But just a very quick overview. What is Pesäpallo?
Okay, I try to be quick. But okay, the Pesäpallo was developed from or as a combination of a couple of bat and ball sports, out of which baseball played a significant role because the founder of Pesäpallo, Taco Pihkala, spent a lot of time in USA watching baseball games. And then there was this other Finnish bat and ball game that they played before that called Pesäpallo, which is translated roughly to long ball to English. And basically, Pesäpallo was found officially in 1922. So in 2 years, it's gonna turn 100 years. And I think it says something that, for example, my father's grandfather already played the game. So I'm like the fourth generation of as a player. And I started Pesäpallo as a 6-year-old, and it's been in my life ever since.
Fantastic. Well, I'm actually going to come on to you now, and I do want to talk a little bit about everybody's background, just to help give the listeners and viewers an idea of who we are and how we got into the sport. Ron, how did you find this otherwise obscure Finnish sport?
So, like I said, like you said, I'm from the States. I live in Portland, Oregon right now. But a bunch of years ago, I did not live here. And I actually invented a sport called tennis polo, which people can Google in their spare time. This is not a promo for tennis polo. But in any case, at the time that we were doing that, I did that at a summer camp almost 20 years ago now. And we were looking at other sports and how they are, all sports around the world, to see how they were developed and how they were made, and just to learn about the rules of different games. And during that time, this is like 2005 or so, I came across Pesäpallo the first time. And I said, they play baseball in Finland? What is this? And I thought it was really cool. But in 2005, there wasn't it was definitely nothing online in English, very little video. I just knew this existed and that was it. And I had forgotten about it. And then about 5 or 6 years later, found some videos of Pesis on Vimeo, which sort of made me decide, mostly as a joke, to start following the league. I was like, oh, this would be funny. I should do that. I should follow this. And I could talk about it at parties. This would be really funny. So I got into it. I started watching games, picked the favorite team, which is Vimpeli and Vito. And then, yeah, from there, it sort of spawned into this thing that's, as if you just Google, anybody who doesn't, who I am, just Google my name and Pesäpallo, and then you figure out my journey to this. It's involved me being in embassies and being on TV and being in Finland. I really love it. I love the country, and I really enjoy the game. But I definitely come as a fan. I'm not even a baseball player. Like I coach tennis, like, for fun. So that's actually my actual number one sport. But as a fan and spectator, it's something that's my number one game now. So that's how I arrived here.
Well, I have a very similar story, and I'll go on to it in a moment. But I'm just a fan. I'm not a player. I don't play any sports really. Just a big fan of the game. But Mikko, you obviously have a great history of the game. You started playing when you were 6. You were saying. Tell us a little bit more about your journey through Pesäpallo.
Long story short, my playing career went all the way through the junior, up until the age of 17 or 18, when I turned more or less permanently into the men's series, and I was with my hometown club, Joensuu, as a player when we got promoted to Superpesis, and I played 1 full year, and then because of injuries I basically had to abandon playing, and I had to stop my playing career at the age of 23. And but I had been coaching juniors even while I was playing, and my club offered me a 1-year professional contract as a coach, and I decided that I had just finished my psychology studies, so I thought that I would give it a shot for 1 year, and then I would go back to real work. And 15 years later, here we are. So I've been a coach basically all over Finland now, and that my last job was as a coach in Tampere in Pesäpallo, and after that, last year I was invited to be a coach for the national team of Nepal, and I also did coaching in Bangladesh and a little bit in India. And Pesäpallo has actually got some foothold also in there, but we'll go back to that later on. But just as a quick note, and an important one, because my Pesäpallo friends are in constant contact with me, and I know that the situation over there right now is it's like in everywhere else that we live in uncertainty. So all of my friends in Asia, stay home and stay safe.
Yeah, I think that's a message that goes for everybody. It's a very difficult time. If people are listening and don't know what we're talking about, we're recording this in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. And obviously, the key thing is to keep safe. But it's had a massive impact on sport globally, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. What are your other interests, Ron? Coming back to you a moment.
So I work in tech. Other interests. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I work in tech full time, but also coach tennis for years. So I've done that for 20 years. As just like as a hobby, and so that's been probably the biggest thing. Other things you can learn about, but Paces has definitely been a fun journey. It's been a fun part of to have this as part of my life, to learn some Finnish, and to really make it something that's taken on a life of its own. And again, I didn't plan for it to happen this way. So it's and it's just beginning, really. It's been going on for a while, but the journey is really just beginning still.
Yeah, and Mikko, for those of you who don't know you, you're a big football fan, or soccer to America. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a sport that has actually played a major part in my life. I started playing football at the same time that I started to play Pesäpallo too. And I played other sports, but football is something that I followed, and even got to the point that I actually write about the sport. And I also write about Pesäpallo. It's been something that I've done for a couple of years now. And actually, at this very moment, I was supposed to still be in UK, in Liverpool, to be precise, to cover their Premier League season, but it was abandoned and plans changed. But yeah, football and also American football, those both count as like my major interests.
Well, a little bit about me. I'm a lawyer based here in the UK. I'm a big Pesäpallo fan. Obviously, started the blog, and we're doing this podcast. Got into the sport by, well, being a bit of a baseball fan, really, just general sports fan, and discovered this very much in a similar way to Ron, and went, huh? This is crazy, what's this? And as soon as I started watching it, I really fell in love with the game. And I just thought, there's so much here that I love about baseball, but so much more as well. And that was really what's kept me with the sport. The biggest problem I found, and I'm sure, Ron, you found the same at the beginning, there was nothing out there in English. Nothing at all. And there's still not a great deal of content. But I'm hoping that as the community grows, we can start to change that a little bit and grow the game abroad.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely. I think that was the biggest barrier at first. I had a lot of Finns who helped me in the beginning, and my Finnish was even worse than it is now in the beginning. And so I had a few Finnish folks I had met online who were really helpful in helping me to make sense of stuff and translate things and all of that. I'm pretty good now, but it was in those first couple of years, especially when there was nobody online to talk to about it other than a handful of folks. It was, there was no hashtags, there's no Superpesis Twitter account, like none of those things existed when I got into it. So it was definitely kind of a lonely road for a while, but it's great now. Things have gotten way better.
Sorry, Mikko, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was actually gonna add to that from my perspective, when I started to make international connections with people who were interested in the game, and especially when I went abroad to coach the game and started that process, that actually taught me a lot about the how should I put it, how difficult it actually is to create the terminology of this game in English. Like, we can use a lot of words that people have been accustomed to from baseball, cricket, or other bat and ball sports. But the game itself is like it's hugely complicated in terms of rules and all the things related to that. And so it's been like I found out that for example in Asia I had to like come up with some new things almost on a daily basis, because there were no like previous cases of how this was done. But I think we're in a good start, and this podcast could be a huge help to people, for example, in Switzerland and in the Indian subcontinent, where Pesäpallo has a small but really active base of players.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take a very short break and then move on to our next topic, the introduction to the game itself. Okay, well, welcome back. What is Pesäpallo? Let's try and break it down in like really simple terms. I think, Ron, something you mentioned to me the other day, you felt it was like baseball on acid, or was it you, Mikko? I can't recall.
I think it was a term that a New York Times reporter came up with when he was visiting our All-Star game a couple of years ago. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that really strikes me is there's so many similarities with baseball, and it's one of the things I've drawn a distinction of on my blog. But you don't have all the sort of time delays, the game delays. It's a bat and ball sport at its heart. But the pitching is entirely different. In baseball, you've got a pitcher's mound, and it's a horizontal pitch to the batter. But in Pesäpallo, it's a vertical pitch. Is that right?
Yes, and that is basically the one key factor that makes this sport completely different from a tactical perspective also, because once you start playing, it doesn't take long before you hit the ball more times than you don't hit it. Like you get contact to the ball whenever you want to, basically. And that changes the perspective of the game dramatically. And also, like, Pesäpallo is also a duel between the pitcher and the batter. But it's like, from my perspective, it's also a battle between the pitcher and the head coach, who usually uses the signal fan that we will probably talk about in the later episodes. But that's one of the key factors, one of the key differences. But like, I'm not going to the history of Pesäpallo all the way through, but just as I want to mention that Pesäpallo also has a background of being like a sport that is also good for military purposes. The creator of Pesäpallo was one of the influences that he had was that Pesäpallo can help the soldiers to keep up the essential skills that they would need, like when going to war or preparing to go to war. And that's like throwing and running and things like that. So it has a background from there too.
Like silent signals, like the fan signals, knowing like secret codes and things as well. Absolutely, and I think, Ron, you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I was going to say two things. One, that the signs thing is another thing they have in common with baseball, except in baseball, the signs are, a person does the signs rather than the fan. So you'll have a coach do the sign to whoever, and it's usually for, the batter or maybe one of the runners that they're doing the sign for. So that's kind of fascinating. The other thing is I was just gonna to Miko's point about is like, and Miko, you'll tell us this is accurate or not. Isn't it that like when you're out or you get out or wounded, it's wounded and killed, right? Like the language you use, it's not like outs or whatever else in a baseball or whatever.
Well,
Is
yeah,
that right?
I mean, in from the viewpoint of history, that's exactly how it goes, and we're still talking about somebody getting wounded. That is true, but like in the last 20 years or so, we have scrapped the term to be killed or to die, and we're using the term out also in Pesäpallo.
Yeah.
It's an interesting note that you make there, Ron. And there's a distinction, of course, between being wounded and being out. And it's one that's really different to a lot of sports. Being caught in, say, cricket or in baseball, that's it. The hitter is out. But in Pesäpallo, it takes on a whole new meaning. It's a wholly different thing. Was that something that was a bit kind of confusing at first, Ron?
So the whole thing, so for people who don't understand this, I mean, you probably read a little bit. Hopefully you did a little bit of homework before you jumped into the podcast. But if you didn't, that we're talking about here is in Pesäpallo, obviously the batter can use all three of their strikes to hit the ball in play, which obviously is not a thing in baseball, right? Maybe closer to cricket, right? Because in a sense that you get like 6 overs, right? So you get 6 balls, right? Is that right? Or is it 5?
Well, there are 6 balls in an over, but a batsman never technically has to run in cricket. They can just choose whenever. But it's an interesting distinction.
So at least there's a parallel to that. Baseball has none of this, right? So whenever I have to explain to people that you don't have to, in baseball, you would sacrifice a runner. If I want to advance a runner in baseball from first base to second base or second to third, I may send a batter up to sacrifice himself, go up, hit a ball to the deep center field so that runner can advance from second to third. In Pesis, I don't need to do that, which is really cool. I thought that was really great. So that part wasn't hard. The wounded and out thing was hard at first until you see it. Reading about it doesn't make any sense. You kind of have to see the game to understand. For instance, you watch a game in Pesäpallo and a guy will catch a ball and he'll drop it automatically on purpose so that, so that guy loses a strike. Like as a baseball fan, you see that and you go, why do they just drop it? Well, there's tactical reason for why you do that. But you kind of need to see that. You can't just read about that because it won't make sense until you see it. Once you see it, it makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, well, I get that now. So yeah, it was, but at first it was not intuitive until I started seeing games and watching them.
I kind of think of it as almost the opposite of the infield fly rule, in a way.
Exactly what it is. Yep. There was a controversy, actually, I'll point out. Last year, there was a controversy in baseball last year where it was like the end of the season, and a guy was pitching to get to 200 strikeouts in a season, a pitcher. And so his teammates, knowing he needed this, he wanted to get this record. Maybe it was 300, because that's a big milestone in baseball. 300 strikeouts. It doesn't happen very much anymore. So his teammates, somebody hit a foul ball that they could have caught, but instead of catching the foul ball, they let it drop, which to me looked like a Pesis play. I'm like, oh, it's like Pesis almost. And so, but it was controversial here because they're like, I can't believe that they would do that. And he got a strikeout and it all worked out. But anyway, so yeah. But it's the opposite of the infield fly rule, exactly what it is. It's hilarious.
Perhaps, Miko, you could add your take, obviously, with your experience, what it is. What is the difference between being wounded or being caught in that circumstance and being out?
Well, shortly, when you catch the ball directly from the air, that is, any runner who is out of base at that very moment has no, we're calling that the runner is not safe anymore. So they have to advance to the next base before the ball gets there. And that is the basic thing that the runner has to do. But if the runner is standing on base and it's not the third strike, then basically nothing happens. And you can, the catch catch itself is like the rule is so complicated and has so many layers that we would probably need to talk about it in a in a separate show. but it's like over the years they had some tactical dimensions have been created through the possibility of not being out automatically when the other team catches the ball straight from the air. Like we hit the ball high to the outfield on purpose. That is, if we would speak about the most important hit that you need to learn in Pesäpallo, that would actually be that you can hit the ball deliberately, a high ball to the outfield, so that the runners can get safely to the next base, and then the outfield has to come up with the solution that do they take the ball out and the runners out, or do they actually, like Ron said, drop the ball on purpose, which usually happens so that when the outfield teams want runners on all bases. And also that sounds crazy from the baseball point of view, but it's actually if we take two, like shortly, we take two options. First one, you drop the ball and you have runners on all bases, or the second one, that you catch the ball and you only have a runner, for example, on third base. If you have runner on all bases, then it forces the batting team to come up with something during the next 3 strikes, the next batter. But if you only have the runner on third base, he or she, the runner doesn't have to run. Like they can hit the ball anywhere on the pitch, and if you make one more small mistake anytime, that's pretty much automatically a run. So it creates tactical dimensions, and it is being used on purpose, like not in the smallest junior teams and games, but I would say that when we reach teenage and from there afterwards, it is a tactical weapon, most certainly in Pesäpallo.
And talking about tactics and sometimes wanting more runners on base, the layout of the bases seems very alien to what Americans would be familiar with, or anybody familiar with baseball. And the distances between the bases increases. So, first base is pretty close, and then second base is further, and so on and so forth. In American baseball, obviously, you go straight right, there's first, and you go round in an anti-clockwise fashion. In Pesäpallo, it kind of zigzags. You go left first. Ron, did you think that was, again, a curiosity when you first came across it?
Yeah, it was definitely an oddity at first, and obviously when I mean, this is, for years I've been showing this game to people, and the first thing they notice, of course, is like, wait, why is third base over there? And you're like, no, that's first base. Like, I'm really confused. And you have to explain, no, it's a zigzag, the bases are further apart. In baseball, everything is 90 feet. The pitcher is 60 feet from home plate. It's a little further than that. 60 feet, 6 inches, something like that. But, Pesis, everything is further away. The pitcher's next door. Yeah, all of that takes a while to explain to people at first. It takes me a good 5 minutes to get through that. And also the other part we talked about earlier with the strikes. And then from there, we're good to go. But that is the hardest part to explain at first, for sure.
Well, hopefully we've given the listeners a little taster of some of the differences between Pesäpallo and baseball, which, as we've said, is perhaps one of the closer sports that it's like. And I think, Mikko, you're absolutely right. There's so much depth here. We're definitely going to have to come back and talk through these things in so much more detail in different episodes. But, this is a great taster for people to just kind of get to grips with the game itself. You mentioned, Miko, before that Pesäpallo is being played in other countries as well. We've seen the World Cup last year in Pune in India, and I believe you were out there for the World Cup.
Yeah, that's right. And I was there as a head coach of Nepal. And like I said, I was also coaching the Bangladesh national teams before the World Cup. And in World Cup, I got to know a lot of new people around the world who were somehow connected with sport. And like I mentioned earlier, like Switzerland, for example, is they had amazing teams and they had amazing people like to join the team. So they created a great atmosphere to all their events and all the games and showed great sportsmanship throughout the tournament. And Switzerland was actually the runner-up after Finland in men's World Cup. And they played some impressive Pesäpallo. So, for example, the teams from Asia, they barely had a chance against Switzerland, and so it's been interesting. It's quite new in Asia, but I truly believe in the possibilities of Pesäpallo growing slowly but surely in Asia, and I have also had plans to go back there to create something like build on top of what we got started. But let's see. So it was a surprise to me, and it's something that I believe that has a good, bright future.
And that's the thing, that if this game can get out there, and it's all about the exposure to help grow the game. So far, it's been this kind of little best kept secret in Finland in many respects. Certainly, my perspective of it is. But hopefully now, with more globalization, more things being out there in different languages as well, and as you say, there's a growth in the Indian subcontinent as well, that it'll help really grow this sport as a sport in its own right, and not just kind of some odd thing that people do in Finland.
Yes, and so like brief addition to the thing, I believe that this growth, and I think that we would also go just in like future episodes, but I think that it comes down to three things. Like first of all, getting the kids to play the sport wherever in the world that is, so that they learn the basics of the sport while they're growing up, and so that they have the basic skills that we can build on tactically, for example, when they reach their teenage years. And the other thing is the quality of coaching, and obviously the umpiring, and that's one of the key steps one of the key things that Finland has to be able to produce in the start, so that the game can advance. And the third, and the probably the most difficult one, is the equipment, because the Pesäpallo equipment is even on European or Western standards, it's quite expensive. I mean, when you buy a brand new Pesäpallo bat, we're talking about 300 euros roughly, and it lasts maybe, like, it depends, but it only has a guarantee of 1 month if you're playing in some actual series, like in the highest levels. So it's quite expensive, and also the glove is 150 euros, more or less. So it's like, when we go to the Indian subcontinent, the fact is that we cannot produce the amount of equipment that would be needed. And also, one ball is like 20 euros, and it only lasts for like, you can hit it 100 times at most. and after that you have to throw it in the trash. You cannot use it for anything else than play catch. So it's but right now they are starting to make their own equipment in India. And I actually, for example, I have a baseball Pesäpallo glove made of leather that has been made in India. So that's they came up with some samples in the World Cup, and they are starting to make bats out of wood as a start, because it's and that is something that juniors use in Finland too. So it's like
Cheap.
I believe that it's baby steps, but we're getting there in the right direction.
And finally, obviously, the key for this podcast is Superpesis, which is the top division in Finland, and there are currently 14 teams who vie for that championship. Ron, you're a big Vimpeli fan.
That's right, yeah.
And obviously, one of the other teams, the current reigning championship team, is Joensuu Myla. And Mikko, that was your previous team. But you also mentioned another team, Monza PP, who have just been promoted to Superpesis from the second tier. What was it like working with Monza last year? Because they really were a cut above the rest of the Pesis, the second division teams, weren't they?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience, to be honest, because of the people who were related to the team. And so the atmosphere that we worked in was like there was a lot of stuff happening. The club was expanding, and they changed the chairman of the club, the president of the club, in the middle of the year. That was it was a planned move, and but things were like there were all kinds of twists and turns. But in the actual playing field, we came up with this peaceful environment. And also we had great players and an amazing spirit. That was, I think that was something that separated us, and the professionalism of the players, even though they were hardly paid anything to play the game. But we got there, and now Pesäpallo is coming from. It will remain a game of the smaller towns and cities, and places like Vimpeli, for example, that has I'm not sure, but we're talking about 4,000 or 5,000 people in the whole village, and that's amazing, and I love that. But now we're getting like bigger cities also in Finnish scale that are starting to have close to Superpesis level teams, and I think that the future will bring the sport more to the bigger cities like Tampere. But now they have a men's team for the first time in 30 years, and that's one of the main reasons I hope that the season would get underway.
Oh, sure. There's a lot of hype about Tampere coming up. There's a lot of really interesting dynamics between all the teams who are in Superpesis this year. We've just had the Holly SM, the indoor tournament group stages, and we'll come on to this in the news section in a moment. But a lot of information that people can get. The Superpesis website, which is superpesis.fi. It is, of course, all in Finnish, but the blog that I run does try and break some of that information down into English. So yeah, hopefully there's going to be a lot more platforms out there in the future that will, get this news out there in English. We're going to take a second short break now. and we'll be right back to talk about all the latest news in Superpesis. Okay, and welcome back. So now after the break, we're going to get onto the really grim stuff, the latest news. Well, nothing's happening in terms of games globally at the moment. Just before the break, I was talking about the Hali SM group games, which started in January this year with Johansson Myla playing off and beating Silinjarv and Pesis. Very convincing win, looked very strong, Johansson. But it all then came to a grinding halt at the semi-final stage because of the pandemic. We know that across the world, a lot of teams are struggling. A lot of teams are in a very precarious position. Mikko, that's definitely true of Pesis teams, of Pesäpallo teams, because a lot of the income that they make, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's through the ticket sales, through the local sponsors, and things like that. So without the games being played, the income really starts to dry up. Is that right?
Well, that's 100% true. I mean, for a Superpesis team, it varies through the country, but I would say that they make roughly 1/4 or 1/3 of their whole income through the gate, from the ticket sales, and but the major problem will also be working with the companies that support those clubs, because the contracts they are tied to some event that would happen during the season, some game or some player or something like that, and they have multiple kinds of deals that have been tied to the events that are in the game or close to the game, or like some all kinds of things that clubs will lose their income if the games are not played. That's like to simplify the thing. And right now we're looking at the possibility of the season being started at the beginning of June. And actually, now that we're recording this, all the clubs from men's and women's Superpesis will get together in a couple of days. Actually, the exact date from my information is on Monday the 13th. So the clubs will gather and see the latest information and come up with the decision that will they go on as is the plan now, so that the games would start at the beginning of June, or do they have to postpone that? And right now, watching the news and listening to the latest information in Finland, we're expecting the pandemic to reach its peak in Finland somewhere around mid-April or the start of May. So personally, I'm not too optimistic about it. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but and it's not news yet, but from my point of view, there's just no way to start the Superpesis that early. It has to be delayed for at least a month. And there is a possibility that a part of the season could be played indoors. and that is also one possibility that they're looking at. But from my sources of information, the possibility of playing without audience, without crowd, without spectators, that has been ruled out, because it would bring most of the costs of the event, but like almost no income. So that has been ruled out.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of talk around the world about what games can and can't be played behind closed doors, as it were, without fans there. Pesäpallo really doesn't seem like it's one of those games, especially the way that the kind of modelling works in terms of sponsorships, in terms of the ticket sales and things like that. The economics of the teams at the moment are such, tell me if I'm wrong, but there's only one team who's been able to guarantee their players' wages through April, and that was Johansson Myla. And that's only because they'd been able to secure a lot of early deals in January, I think it was.
Well, that is how it is. And the Players Association and the clubs, they have sat around the same table a couple of weeks ago and talked about the situation. But there's the truth is that there's not a lot that can be done, because there's just no income, and that's like the finances of the Superpesis teams are well, how should I put it? At best, they may reach like zero, like not. A lot of the teams never make actual profit in their whole, like, no matter how many seasons they spend in Superpesis, they hardly ever make any profit in any season. The reality is that if you can like create enough income to provide all the costs, that's a 100% that you can do. But right now, in this situation, the clubs they don't have anything to go by. They don't have any money that they would have or would be coming from anywhere. So they have no options but to lay out all their stuff and the players too.
And as a result, Ron, we've seen a lot of the teams try and come up with new ways of both engaging fans while there's no new games being played, but also to try and boost revenues. We've seen like Game Saver shirts. We've seen sales of different varieties, auctions of things. Do you want to talk us through some of those kind of things?
Well, I know Vimpel Vinto started just actually right now is doing a on their Instagram is doing an auction of player jerseys to sell, presumably game worn jerseys that folks can buy. And so that's cool. I know some teams have been selling season tickets that you can sort of buy them anyway, support the team, and I think more information like that would be great. I think it could be really good, especially with something like this, is to find out, like if you start listening to this and you find a team, that the beauty of it, as everybody's been saying, is that if you're used to, like, say, American sports or EPL or something like that, the numbers that for Superpesis is way lower. So if you want to support a team from far away, like it would be great for a team, but it wouldn't cost you very much if you have the wherewithal to do that. Like I know I'm going to just kick some support to one of these teams, because the beauty of Pesis is that it's a community sport. You see people, all kinds of folks in the community who are involved from a really young age all the way through. I think that's one of the beauties of it, and so we want to make sure this game stays alive for the next 100 years. And so I think that as fans of the game, anything we can do to try to support it, because again, they're not asking for, this isn't the New York Yankees asking you for money. This is nothing like that at all. These are mom and pop shops run by folks who just really enjoy the game. Which is, like I said, I think the thing that makes Pesis, if you're a global fan of sports and you just want a new thing to get into, the thing that makes Pesis awesome is that it's major league in the sense that it's on television and you can watch the games and it's produced professionally and it's got a long history, and you've got these legacy clubs. They're not franchises, clubs that people support, but it's also definitely very like, your heroes are right next to you. They eat at the same restaurants, and you get to hang out with them and stuff. So I think that's the thing that I want to make sure people know about this game, is that it's very accessible. So anyway, I took it a little out of field there, but I wanted to get that out there.
No, that's absolutely right, and it really hammers home the point that the players are ordinary people. They're part of a broader community. The community themselves is being hit, so the local businesses, they're not able to offer the sponsorship in the same way, and they're not able to get the advertising from the games because the games aren't being played, which then has a double impact on the team, and that's perhaps why it's being so difficult for the Superpesis teams to weather through this storm. Some of the other things that obviously I've been looking at, I was going to be coming over to Finland in June. I'd been invited by Cricket Finland to come and score some of their games in the World Cup qualifier. But unfortunately, that tournament's no longer taking place at this time, so it's been postponed. And while I was going to be there, I was going to go to Hyvinkää to watch Hyvinkää and Taco play. And I think it was going to be a Mansa Pepe as well, so I was really, really excited to go and watch that. And the other team I was going to go see play was Korvalon Palonlyijat in Korvala. But because I can't go, because I can't see the teams, I felt really bad that I can't give them the revenue that I would have had in my pocket to give them at the gate for my tickets. So I've tried to buy stuff from their shops, and I got my Korvalon t-shirt earlier this week. Really, really good. So I've got that somewhere. I've got a few other things that I want to buy. I've got a few other things on the way as well from other places. But Juha Putimaki had a really interesting idea. He's the pitcher for Johansson Myler at the moment. He's a two-time running pitcher of the year, two-time running player of the year. And he had a really interesting idea. I don't know if either of you saw it, but he was offering to buy, I think it was like 3 tickets for fans at away games, for every away game. So he was effectively helping the revenue streams for his opponents, which Ron, as an American sports fan, must be really confusing. Can you imagine a Red Sox fan doing that to a Yankees game?
Yeah, that's unheard of. Yeah, like unless it's some really big issue or something, that's pretty unheard of for a player to do something like that. And so I thought that was a really cool. I did see that on Instagram, and that was a really cool gesture. But I think it speaks again to how Pesis is a community of people. Miko could talk about this, but players don't. There's not free agency. Players move because they get a job in a city or they're going to school in a city. It's not the same kind of it's not. It's competitive, but it's a different kind of. I even am going to games and watching. I was at a playoff game, last year in Vimpeli. It's the decisive game, the series that we're going to lose, and even then, fans, while people obviously cheer for their team, there's no booing. It wasn't. I didn't see a lot of people even said is we don't do some fans may do that, but we don't do that. We cheer for our team, and that's who we root for. And so it's not doesn't feel like life or death. Sometimes people make sport feel like life or death, and it's not. Especially now, we know that, right? Like living in this pandemic, wherever around the world, we know that this is just sport. It's just a game. It's not that important in the grand scheme of things. But I think that, I thought it was really cool that he offered to do that, and it's something that, like I said, I think that hopefully other folks are able, fans that can afford to do that would also chime in and do the same thing. Because again, we want to keep the game alive.
And some of the other reasons to be cheerful during this lockdown, in the season. I'm sure I know, Ron, you've been following it, but Antti Harpasalo has been looking at some of the old classic games on his Twitch feed, which has proven really popular. Now, anybody who doesn't understand Finnish, you'll just enjoy the game. You won't understand the commentary. I pick up a few words, obviously, but my Finnish, like Ron's, is probably not the best. So, but that's had a big impact, certainly in the people I know who are interested in Pesäpallo. Mikko, how's the community in Finland received those broadcasts?
Well, I think that's one of the best ideas to improvise something during the lockdown, and while we're waiting for decisions about the games, and while we're in this situation of uncertainty, it is something that has been welcomed with arms. But also, like, the teams, they are forced to improvise in negative ways also because of the financial situation, but they also have to create some new things that I think that they will live on even after the pandemic has been, like, when we reach the situation that we have this thing under control. And the examples that you mentioned, like, for example, the auctions and buying tickets, and Juha has promised that he will, for each 3 tickets that he buys to each game, he will give them away through social media before each game, which in turn helps the marketing of the event. And I think that it will get other people to join in too. And we need a lot of ideas like that. They are just small streams, but like Ron said very well, that this is first and foremost, this is a community sport. It's like, I've been born and bred in Joensuu, which is a town of roughly 70,000 people nowadays. So it's the biggest in the 100-kilometer radius. So it's like I've seen the ups and downs of this club, and now that they've reached the peak and they have won the championship, their first ever, now 2 times in a row. It's just amazing to know that you're a part of this kind of community, and they also give something back. Then that is something that, it's like Ron said, that Vimpeli is one of the prime examples, probably one of the best example of what it means to the community. That if you're born in Vimpeli area, there's no way that you can avoid being in touch with Pesäpallo, and you don't want to. It's like it runs through the generations, and that's amazing. And that's why it's also the field, the pitch that is on an island. It's also something that it's like maybe 70% of the players would say that it's their favorite, one of their favorite, or the favorite away game of the year. And I would say the same as a player. It's an amazing place for many reasons. And Finland is full of stories like that, like small communities. And the players are everyday people, just like Ron said. That's the beauty of the game.
Well, I'm going to wrap up the podcast now. I just want to say a very special thank you to my co-hosts, Ron Bronson and Mikko Pirhonen. Thank you very much for being with me through this podcast. I hope everybody's enjoyed listening and sticking through, and I hope you will come back again. Please like the podcast and subscribe on whatever channels you subscribe it on. Also, please do visit our Twitter handle at Superpesis R. There's also our blog. It's superpesisroundup.blogspot.com, and we'll see you again real soon.
that's hidden far away.